Hello everyone, my name is James Rankin and today I am going to talk to you about how to use Microsoft User Profile Disks, which is also known as UPD, on Windows 10. Now, a lot of you may remember User Profile Disks as first coming along as a Windows Server feature. I can't remember whether it was Windows 2008 R2 or Windows 2012 where it came along. I'm thinking 2012, back in the mists of my memory, is possibly where I first heard them. But certainly they were first a feature that only appeared on the server end of things. Now, what a user profile disk does is essentially mounts a VHD of the entire user's profile to a network share, which kind of lets you roam that profile around and kind of attach the VHD when the user logs on. Anybody out there thinking, doesn't that sound just like FS Logics? Yes, it very much is. Very like the way FS Logics behaves. Obviously, FS Logics is much more enterprise capable than UPD, works on different operating systems and does a lot more than UPD these days, to be perfectly fair. But the genesis of the profile containers product of FS Logics is based on UPD. The reason I'm going to talk about UPD is because a lot of the time I talk to people who don't have any money to spend at all. They just want something really basic that'll get them up and running in this kind of fashion, and UPD is good for that. It's not by any shape of the imagination a fantastic enterprise class solution. It's just a solution you can put in. But as I said, a lot of people know of it on as a kind of, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't on servers that they've looked at but have never really used it. But just if you've got Windows 10 out there and you want roaming between your devices and you're maintaining a one-to-one relationship, a lot of people don't realize you can use it on Windows 10. So I'm going to show you how to do it. And just before I get started, I should have a quick hat tip to Claudio Rodriguez, who first publicized this way of doing things, and Toby Phipps, I believe, who gave him the necessary commands to do it. But so yes, we can do user profile disks on Windows 10. Technically for VDI, although it'll work on anything, not just VDI. What do you need to do this? Number one, you need an SMB share on a file server to put your VHD profiles in. You will also need some Windows 10 machines, of which we have a couple here, of Windows 10 1803 x64 Enterprise Evaluation Editions. And 3, there is no 3. That's all you should need to get up and running. So, without further ado, let's get started on making UPD work on Windows 10. Now, first, I am going to switch across to my domain controller here and go into the file system on here, because this domain controller also doubles up as my primary file share. So in here we have a share called File Store, which is just my generic file share, and in there I've got a subfolder called Profiles. Profiles is where I'm going to store my user profile disk VHDs. What you need to make sure you do is actually the security permissions on here need to be particularly set. You need everyone who's going to access the user profile disks share needs to be able to access it on a share level and an NTFS level. So you can see on the NTFS level, we've just bunged everyone full control on here. What you also need to specify is the domain computers group is full control. I'm not saying what you could do is put on specific devices and specific users, but just for the purposes of this demonstration, we've gone quite broad with the scope. In fact, you couldn't get any broader than that. We've put everyone with full control and domain computers with full control. The same possibly goes for our file share as well. Let's just have a look at the permissions on here, and again, yep, you see we've got everyone full control on the file share and domain computers full control on the file share as well. So every device and user, don't forget UPD is a device setting, so when a device is enabled for UPD, every user that logs on to that device will try and create a user profile disk. It's not like FS Logics, you can't say certain groups get it. and certain groups don't. So every device that will have UPD enabled and every user who will access that device needs to have full control on a share and an NTFS level. Yep, excellent. That's the first part of the stuff that you need to do. Now, what we need to do now is create a template VHD within here. Yep. No, we don't need to do that first. Getting ahead of myself. What we need to do in here, first of all, is create some subfolders for each set of operating systems that we'll be using this on, right? And this goes by profile version. So you could have 2012 R2 and Windows 8.1 could share a profile folder. Windows 10 version, the release to manufacturing version, and the 1511 version shared a profile version, so they could share a folder. Everything after the 1607 folder right up to 1803 can also share a profile folder. We're only going to demonstrate it on one, but in here we're going to create a folder called Win10 1803, which is basically going to hold our profile user profile disks for anything from Windows 10 version 1607 to 1803. So obviously if you also had users accessing, for instance, Windows 8.1 and Server 2012 R2 machines, you'd create another folder in here because the profile is a different version to the others, so it needs to be separate. Yeah, so create folders for all of the operating system versions that you require. I've got a blog post on my blog at james-rankin.com that I might link to in the profile from this, that basically tells you what profile versions apply to what operating systems. So that may be useful figuring out how many of these that you need to have. Right, now that we've done that, what we need to do now is actually create a template VHD file to go in the root of the folder first, and then a copy to all of the subfolders. So I am going to, without further ado, simply use a bit of PowerShell, which is hopefully going to create for me a template VHD. So let's just copy it from there, and can I paste straight into there? It's never my lucky day when it comes down to pasting, is it? Let's just try pasting that in again. Right, paste it in this time. So, as you can see, the command I've copied's got server share profiles, which is obviously not a path that'll resolve to anything. So you just simply type in here the actual path to the file share M2. Now, so you're doing a get WMI object to create a user profile disk template. So put the path in there. The important bit is this number at the end is the maximum size that VHD template can grow in gigabytes. So I'm being a bit on the conservative side here with 1 gigabyte. So I think probably a good idea. Don't forget, we're capturing the entire user profile. It's not like a roaming profile where we're just capturing the app data roaming folder. This is everything, so all the cruft, everything that goes in there. So maybe 5 or even 10 gigabytes, possibly a better number to size your template around. You can go and change it later, but I think that's a much better idea, just to give yourself, I mean, you can go in and open them up if they start getting too big, mount them offline and delete some of the stuff from there, maybe even mount it and run a script, but just to err on the side of caution, I'd go with 5 or 10. I'm just putting 1 down literally because I'm probably short of space on my file store and I don't want things to grow too big. So once you got that command, just let it run there. Doesn't actually matter, just get rid of that notepad window there. It doesn't actually matter where you run this from. You can run it from anywhere and create the same thing. I've just run it from a Windows 10 1803 machine because I'm using it as the template for 1803, but you could copy and paste that template anywhere. So that's the feedback you'll get, which means that if it says return value 0, it's been successful. So if we flip back to our file share, we're saying there now there is now a VHDX file in there called uvhd-template. It's sized at 100 meg because that's where it starts at. It will expand itself as necessary up to the maximum. So now copy this and dump it in your subfolder. just there. So when you point someone to this folder to store their VHD in, and they haven't got one, it'll use that as the template. Yeah? Sound good so far? Right. Now we need to enable our devices, our Windows 10 devices. We now need to enable these for UPD. So we'll just switch back across here, and this time see if I can copy this more effectively than last time. Let's give it a bash. Look at that. There you go. This is the command you need to enable user profile disk on here on this device. Now you'll see this time I've actually pre-populated the path. Now instead of just pointing to the profile share this time, for this particular machine you need to point it to the right operating system version. So if this was a Windows 2012 R2 machine, we'd replace this with the Windows 2012 R2 subfolder in there. Because this is Windows 10 1803 and we've created a folder called Win10-1803, we'll append that now onto the end of that UNC path that we need to put in there. All the rest of it is completely generic. So let's just run that, and that's the return value of 0 we've got again there. This machine is now enabled for user profile disks. Now the process of enabling literally just writes some keys to the registry. So interestingly enough, if you just open the registry up on this machine, and if we go into H key local machine, system, current control set, control, then down to terminal server, into cluster settings. These are the settings that basically enable UPD. So there's the URL in there that we've specified. There's the fact that it's enabled. No idea what that means. And this is a bit of an important bit here, the UVHD roaming policy file. Now if you then browse to the actual location where this is located, so C Windows, remote packages, RD farm, go into there, what you should find is a single XML file, and what it should have in is this. That should be it. So what you can do is you can literally set this up simply with group policy files and group policy preferences rather than having to run that PowerShell command. Yeah. So what this means is, because literally all the PowerShell is doing is creating some registry entries and putting a file on the machine. If we copy that file, which I've already done, to a central location on a file share, and then if we switch back to our domain controller here, you see we've got this group policy object here, which is which is called enable UPD. And if we look at the settings for it and expand all these out, basically we are taking the file from the file share and dropping it into that path, which won't exist by default, but that's okay. The group policy preference will change it, and we are literally setting the registry keys that we had there as required. Now obviously bear in mind this will have to be OS specific, because as we keep saying, you're pointing it to the UVHD share URL, which is specific to the OS. You would have to create a group policy object, one for Windows 10 1803, one for Windows 10 1511, one for Windows 8.1, etc. You'd have to separate them like that, but it's quite easy. If we then switch to our other machine over here and we just quickly link enable this GPO, so it's now active on that OU. So over here I shall do a quick GPO update on that, and as I said, the file path doesn't actually exist before this, so this C Windows remote packages, the RD farm folder, doesn't exist, but when the group policy preference applies it will create that, as well as putting the file in there. We just see now, do a GP result /R. What we should be able to see is now enable UPD here is now applying on there. So if we then look in the There you go, I've already been looking for it earlier just to make sure it would work, and there you go, it's been created and it's in there, and those registry entries will now be in there as well. So effectively this machine is now also enabled for UPD without running any of that PowerShell. I'll just quickly check that we have actually got the HK lock machine system. Current control, set control, can't remember the rest of it. Where's my reference? Terminal server, cluster settings. There it is. All that stuff is in there now. UVHD enabled, UVHD share URL. It's all ready to rock. Or actually, is it all ready to rock? Because there's a setting there that's not replicated in there. It's very odd. Let's just check that my group policy replication's working properly. Very strange to see a setting go down, unless there was a delta coming across from the other domain controller, possibly when I did the 2 stages of... Let's have a look. There you go. Whoopie-doop. Now it should be enabled. The benefits of always having 2 things next to each other, so you can check that out there. So yeah, they are now both enabled for UPD. Yep, so we're ready to log on and it should do its stuff. So the next user that logs on, because as I keep saying, it is a device-wide setting, so every user logs on here, even an administrator, will get a UPD created. And as I said, this is one of the drawbacks of UPD. They are very much a cheap and cheerful way of achieving what you can do. If you want the true enterprise class features, if you want to be able to pick the groups that can log on, if you want to have multi-session capability, merge capability, the ability to redirect specific parts of the profile, to exclude parts of the profile and things like that, I think you can exclude with UPD, actually, off the top of my head, but shall check that later. But yeah, if you want the full fat version of this, buy FSLogix instead. This is just for, you know, a cheap and cheerful way of getting it up and running in one-to-one environments. So let's log on as a user. Let's log on as J Rankin, because that's me. And hopefully we should see a user profile disk being created. So let's have a quick butchies over at our file server, and there you go. There you have a VHD being created called UVHD dash and then the user's SID. Again, very annoying if you want to have more better names for your VHDs to make them easy to find whose is whose, then, you know, go get FSLogix where it gives you the user's name on there instead of just a SID. Again, another feature. You could use things like SIDA. I think Eric Harvestein did a good article about this originally, where he discussed various ways of identifying whose was whose, but as I said, not here to demonstrate all the finer points of that. That's just something you'll have to deal with. Now, you can see here it's taking a while to log on because it is a Windows 10 first log on, and if you watched any of my videos, you should remove all the UWP apps from your machines because otherwise it takes ages to log on. Guess who hasn't remembered to do that when he set the machines up for this? It's always the way, isn't it? It's like a plumber's house with a leak in it, or an electrician's house with faulty wiring. It's my virtual machines I'm using, where I am doing exactly the opposite of what I've told you all to do on several times. So do as I say, not as I do, when it comes down to UWP apps. Oh, and I timed that diatribe almost perfectly to coincide. Now everything should look and behave to all intents and purposes as an ordinary user profile would. You know, you can do the same things, you can save the same things, nothing should be missed, all of that stuff should be there. So let's just make a few customizations. Let's just change the name of this to something weird or stupid. Let's pin a few bits of stuff to the start menu. Pin to start. Yep. What else can we do? Not an awful lot really. That should do us for now. Maybe let's change the desktop background. Always like doing that because then you can tell as soon as you've logged on whether it's worked or not. It's one of the best ideas behind that. Let's just get rid of the task view. Let's get rid of Cortana. I really hope you can't hear my kids arguing outside my office. I'm going to kill them if they appear on the recording. And what shall I do as well? I'll just add a few desktop icons on and move them around. Just some quite generic stuff that your users may do. So let's just punt these over here and then grab the rest of them and put them over there as well. Oh, get rid of that stupid people view as well. That annoys me. Thanks for that. Right, so now I shall just sign out. Now obviously a user profile disk is mounted, mounted VHD across the network. It's addressed as if it's local. The operating system thinks it's a local profile, treats it as a local profile. However, it's mounted to one single file across the network. So kind of the benefit is that you're writing all of the files in that user profile out to the network, but they're written as one file because you're only addressing one file at the other end. So it's quite a weird way of kind of almost cutting down on all the I/O that you would normally associate with roaming profiles and redirected folders and whatnot. Now, let's simply go and see if we can log on. There's our file there. As I say, default config, it's already gone up to 266 meg. So you can see why I suggested going with at least 5 gig, possibly more. It does keep big. Anyway, let's log on to our other machine and see if we can, if our profile successfully makes it across here. Okay, so logging on now. Hopefully it should be a bit quicker this time. This is my, as I keep saying in my videos, my lab, which is uses far too much spinning disk and is hopelessly overcommitted, but it should be quicker than the last time, and you should be able to tell straight away that it's not running through the reprovisioning method there. Look at that, look at that. Now you saw how much quicker that was. I didn't actually time that, but I think that was in the 20-second range. Now that is usually I would say quite really good for the sort of environment that. So yeah, much noticeably faster. As I said, if I'd removed those UWP apps from the image, it would have been a lot faster anyway the first time out. But yeah, you can see there, even in this lab, loaded up quite lovely and quickly. Let's just check that out. Customizations there. Yep, this is my UPD profile. Google Chrome's on the taskbar. My icons have moved around, as you can see. It's all there. It's all there. It's all done. And I enabled UPD on this machine simply by using a group policy object with the file and the registry settings in there to match it. So there you go. That is how you get Microsoft user profile disks up and running on Windows 10 in about 20 minutes or so. Mistakes notwithstanding. So I hope some of you may find that useful. As I said, that is literally just a really cheap and cheerful way of getting roaming done, but it's ideal for environments where you have a one-to-one relationship between the users and their devices. Obviously you can use it on server as well, but you've got to remember, if a session gets hung up on a server and then a user goes to log in somewhere else on another server or another device, it's not going to be able to log in. It's not like a roaming profile. It can't cope with that. What you would have to actually do is go to the file server and release the file log along there, which is why I prefer to recommend it in environments where there is that one-to-one relation, like, you know, maybe like an Amazon Workspace kind of thing where you've got server instances or a VDI or even a physical desktop where users log on to one desktop at a time. If you wanted to get this sort of feature and make it really enterprise class, buy FS Logic. Not really that expensive and works really well. Much better than UPD. It's like UPD on steroids plus loads and loads of other stuff as well. I mean, to compare FS Logics a few years ago to UPD might have been a fair comparison, but now FS Logics does so much more than just the profile mount and things. It's really, I'm not comfortable with considering the same anymore. But anyway, if you want to use user profile disks, to get yourself a quick and easy way of getting roaming going and good logon times and getting away from the problems of latency that you sometimes have with large files and stuff within user profiles, then there's a way to do it. Thank you very much, and goodbye from me.